I want to tell you about one of the most difficult conservation projects of my 40-year career as a paper conservator. It was also one of the most interesting and fun. I'm particularly pleased to be here in Berlin. It's my first visit to the city because it has a special significance to the topic this year. You know that 2015 is the 200th anniversary of the Battle of Waterloo, and I think this is known in Germany as La Belle Alliance. This horrific battle took place in June 1815, when an alliance of armies under the command of the British Duke of Wellington and the Prussian Field Marshal Blücher defeated the French on open farmland near Brussels. 50,000 men were killed or wounded on that day, and 15,000 horses died. But it was the end of 20 years of war with Napoleon. By the way, as a tourist, I learnt yesterday that it was Marshal Blücher who was responsible for returning the victory chariot to the top of the Brandenburg Gate here in Berlin after Napoleon had carried it off to Paris. 40 years later, the Houses of Parliament in London were being rebuilt following a fire. Paintings were commissioned for the interior from the artists of the day to commemorate scenes from British history. The Battle of Waterloo was one of the scenes chosen for an interior fresco. The Royal Academician Daniel Maclise was invited to contribute. His ambitious proposal for the Waterloo job consisted of a full-size chalk drawing on paper known as a cartoon. It was over 3 meters high and nearly 14 meters long. This was too big to fit in Maclise's house, so he ordered the support in sections, ready-made, from London art supplier Robeson's. It consisted of 10 panels on machine-made paper, lined with canvas, and mounted on wooden stretchers. Maclise was a talented and hard-working artist, best known as a portrait painter and a friend of novelist Charles Dickens. His huge but detailed drawing was astonishing, and he was popular with Queen Victoria's husband, Prince Albert, so he got the job. Maclise eventually executed the wall painting not in fresco, but in the waterglass technique, a new method developed in Germany and advocated by Prince Albert. Maclise visited Berlin to learn about the technique. After Maclise's death, some say from overwork, his full-scale drawing was bought by the Royal Academy of Arts in London. At first greatly admired, the cartoon later went on loan to Sandhurst Military Academy, where it was hung in front of some heating pipes in the gymnasium. By the 1930s, the cartoon was in a terrible state. It was dirty, torn, discolored, and falling off the wall. Emergency repairs were made, and the cartoon was stuck down on panels of Sundala pulp board. One senses now, in the 1930s, that the drawing had become an embarrassment. History painting was unfashionable. Images of young men killed in battle were too painful, and the cartoon was looking terrible. The drawing went into long-term storage, and apart from a brief outing in 1972, it was not seen again until just 3 years ago. This was when Royal Academy curators were planning a Battle of Waterloo exhibition. By 2013, the curators had decided to apply for Arts Council funding to get the cartoon into a fit state for travel and display. The Royal Academy of Arts has no conservators on the staff. The cost of conservation treatment was unknown. As an independent conservator, I had been advising the collections department on paper conservation since 1987. I was asked to look at the cartoon at the store, and together with other freelance colleagues, we prepared an outline treatment proposal. This is where the whole project starts to look unusual and challenging. The storage and handling costs are so high for something of this size and vulnerability that the Royal Academy could only get 3 of the 10 panels out of store for a couple of hours for our assessment. I had never seen them before, and I had to decide if I could do the job with the barest knowledge of the task ahead. Obviously, there were a lot of questions. We knew that somewhere with enough space to do the work would be crucial. Could we use the Royal Academy's own art school premises in central London, where Maclise himself had been a student? If we could do this, then the work would have to be done in the students' summer holidays. So how easy would it be to get together enough freelance conservators with the right skills to complete the work in the 2 short weeks that any of us could spare at that time of year? And could we do it without advanced research and tests on the actual work of art? We all know that works on paper come in every sort of size, from postage stamps to wallpaper. So it wasn't the size of the objects that was frightening, it was the unknown. There had been suggestions that the cartoon needed to be deacidified and that removal of the paper and canvas laminate from the board backing ought to be undertaken. It was impossible to tell in advance how practical this would be. Here's a few more images of the condition of the panels. Despite all these unknowns and evident problems, the Royal Academy curators were wonderfully supportive to our team of conservators, and they gave us the go-ahead despite the uncertainties. Once the Arts Council funding was secured, planning for the conservation project began in spring last year. I talked to colleagues, studied records from the Royal Academy archives, visited the Waterloo battle site, went to see the wall paintings in the Houses of Parliament, learnt about the Duke of Wellington and his role during the Napoleonic Wars, and I became enthusiastic. Since we would be working on site in an art school studio, simply a bare room, almost everything needed for a team of 6 conservators and 2 art handlers would have to be transported from my studio 90 miles from London. The conservation techniques we were to use are nothing unusual, but they often called for quick decisions, something I think we conservators prefer to avoid. For example, I soon discovered that the commercial surface cleaning powder that I hoped to use and that we needed in big quantities was no longer available. called Draft Clean Type X. It was used by architects to keep their drawings clean in the past. Now they work on computers. To get round this problem, I borrowed a coffee grinder and tried making the powder from latex sponges. This worked, but it was slow, so we had to buy more coffee grinders. We didn't take any photographs while we were doing the surface cleaning, so this is a sort of reconstruction. Otherwise, the cleaning materials would be very dirty. Another issue was the iron nails, which had been used in the 1930s to attach the panels to wooden strainers, and these had been driven through the face of the drawing. They couldn't be extracted without causing further damage, so they were recessed and the holes were filled. This is one of the art handlers who helped us with the project, and he made a special tool to recess the nails. Numerous creases, bubbles, and lifting areas of paper had resulted from the lining done in the 1930s. These distortions were locally humidified through Gore-Tex and reduced gently by local pressing and a heated spatula. Old losses and tears had been infilled and patched in the past with a jumble of papers, adhesives, pastel, plaster filler, and water-based media. We removed many unsightly old repairs, and then we overlaid damage in prominent areas with Japanese paper toned with watercolors. To speed up the process of repair, we made up a range of swatches of toned Japanese paper in advance so that we could choose the right color there and then. While all this was going on, the activities of moving the panels around and explaining the project to visitors, these things all had to be coordinated and fitted around the work. I had calculated on processing 2 of the 10 panels on each of our 10 working days. We would spend the first 5 days testing, cleaning, consolidation, and then the second week to do repairs and image integration. That was my plan. But even in the first week, a half day was given over to an open studio session with 20 art historians, conservators, curators, reporters, and photographers. In the second week, 2 television crews, a radio journalist, and more photographers came in. Also, we had visits from military historians and uniform specialists. In the event, the opportunity for publicity was, of course, welcome for the Royal Academy, and the conservation team enjoyed a tremendous opportunity to talk about our work. Still, by this time, I was anxious that we would not get the job done in time. So I telephoned colleagues, and 2 more paper conservators generously gave up other work to join us immediately, that day. Have I got a bit more time? Okay. From the business point of view, I have to confess that I made a serious mistake in not taking into account the management aspects of the project from the very beginning. The budget proposed in my 2013 report was based on 6 conservators working for 10 days at £300 per day each, which would total £18,000. The Arts Council grant covered this, plus the other costs like transport and photography, and the installation of the current exhibition. And my colleagues got paid, I'm glad to say. But as it turned out, I had let myself in personally for the hire of 2 art handlers, 2 extra conservators, and eventually many hours on meetings, equipment preparation, the contract, insurance, planning, transport of equipment, and the final reports from the same amount of money. In the end, my own daily rate was less than £60. But that is still plenty more than the national minimum wage, and it was a fantastic experience. So just to conclude, this lecture has not been an account of exciting innovations in conservation techniques, or even the painstaking research and testing which underpins our everyday treatments. It was about a simple, practical approach to cleaning and stabilizing a very large and fragile drawing. Through a successful outcome, I hope to give encouragement to others faced with the management of similar projects. Thank you for listening.